Hello, survivors. Thanks for joining us today. Before we begin, if you enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel. It really means a lot. Also, tell us in the comments which city you're listening from. It's great to see how far our community reaches. Now, let's start the story. The shift started like any other Tuesday at Oak Haven Penitentiary. Clocks ticked with agonizing slowness, fluorescent lights hummed their irritating drone, and the familiar background noise of 600 confined men echoed through the concrete and steel. I'm Mark, just another correctional officer trying to make it through the 3 to 11 shift in C Block, arguably the loudest and most volatile section of this aging state prison. It wasn't the best job, but it paid the bills. And after 4 years, I'd learned the rhythms, the faces, the subtle signs that trouble was brewing. That day, though, the signs weren't subtle. They just weren't making any sense. It began with whispers during rec time. Inmates huddled together, conversations cut short when a CO approached. Usually that meant contraband moving or a fight being planned, but the topic seemed different. Snippets overheard mentioned weird news reports from the cities, riots, strange attacks, hospitals overwhelmed. We dismissed it mostly. Prisons are rumor mills fueled by boredom and paranoia. Outside chaos often sounds appealing when you're locked inside. Still, there was an undercurrent, a nervous energy that felt different from the usual simmering tension. Then came the lockdown drill around 5 p.m. Unexpected, unscheduled. Captain Eva, our shift supervisor, tough as nails, seen it all, seemed unusually tight-lipped about it. Just precautionary, she'd barked over the radio, but her eyes told a different story when she passed through C Block later. They scanned the tiers with more than the usual vigilance, lingering on the inmates who looked flushed, sweaty. We'd had a flu bug going around, but this felt off. A couple of guys in segregation had been acting erratic, banging their heads against the walls, screaming incoherently. Standard ad-seg behavior maybe, but the infirmary calls seemed more frequent. My partner for the shift was Greg, a good guy, maybe a bit too prone to worry, but solid. We were doing evening counts, the metal doors slamming shut with familiar finality, when the first real sign hit. Inmate Miller, usually quiet, refused to lock down. Just stood there in the middle of the tier, staring blankly ahead, shivering, despite the warm cell block. When Greg and I approached, he didn't react until we were within arm's reach. Then he lunged, not like a man fighting, but like an animal. He bit Greg on the forearm, tearing through the uniform sleeve before we could wrestle him down. It took 3 of us, and even then, his strength was unnatural. He was snarling, snapping, eyes clouded over, saliva flecked with blood dripping from his chin. What the hell was that? Greg gasped, clutching his bleeding arm as we dragged Miller, still thrashing, toward the infirmary access gate. Flu's got him bad, I said, trying to convince myself as much as him. But I'd seen rabid animals act like that. Never a human. We got Miller to the infirmary, where Dr. Lena, calm under pressure as always, immediately sedated him and started treating Greg's bite. Nasty one, she murmured, cleaning the wound. Fevers through the roof on Miller. And a few others today. This isn't any flu I've ever seen. Back on the block, the atmosphere had shifted. The rumors weren't just rumors anymore. Word of Miller's attack spread like wildfire. You could feel the fear mixing with the usual hostility, creating a volatile cocktail. Then, around 8 p.m., the power flickered. Emergency lights kicked on, bathing the tiers in an eerie red glow before the main lights stuttered back. But the brief outage was enough. A roar went up from the cells, not the usual jeers and catcalls, but something angrier, more desperate. Suddenly alarms blared. Not the lockdown drill alarm, but the code red. Riot. Simultaneously, the lights flickered again, more violently this time. Distant sounds reached us, shouting, metal striking metal, maybe even gunfire from the administrative wing. "What's happening?" Greg asked, his face pale under the flickering lights, his bandaged arm held protectively. Before I could answer, the cell doors on the 3rd tier popped open. Not just 1 or 2, but the whole row. Electronic lock failure? Or sabotage? It didn't matter. Inmates spilled out, some confused, some opportunistic, but one group moved with purpose, led by Rhodes. Rhodes was bad news even on a good day. Serving life for multiple homicides, ran the biggest gang inside, smart, charismatic, utterly ruthless. He surveyed the chaos below, a predatory grin spreading across his face. This wasn't just panic. This was his moment. "Looks like visiting hours are over, boys," Rhodes bellowed, his voice echoing through the block. "Time to run this place ourselves." He brandished a sharpened piece of metal, a shank fashioned from a bed frame. Others behind him held similar makeshift weapons. The riot had begun. But as Rhodes's crew started smashing lock controls on the lower tiers, something else happened. From the infirmary corridor, screams erupted, followed by guttural snarls that weren't entirely human. The door burst open, and two figures stumbled out. One was a CO I recognized, Davies. The other was inmate Miller, the one who'd bitten Greg. Miller was on Davies, tearing at his throat with his teeth. Davies fired his sidearm wildly before, falling silent, his body convulsing. Miller looked up, his face a mask of blood, eyes vacant, and snarled, turning toward the nearest rioting inmate. Chaos exploded. We were trapped. C-Block had become a three-way war zone. COs caught between rioting inmates taking advantage of the chaos and whatever Miller had become. And worse, I saw other inmates, ones who'd been locked down just minutes before, start to convulse, their eyes clouding over. The infection, whatever it was, wasn't just coming from outside. It was already here. The riot wasn't just a riot anymore. It was feeding the outbreak. "Seal the block." Captain Eva's voice crackled over my radio, strained but still commanding. "All units, fall back positions. Contain C-Block at all costs." But it was too late. Rhodes's crew had already smashed the main gate controls. The sounds of the riot were spreading through Oakhaven, mixing with the unearthly snarls of the infected. We were locked in with them, both kinds of monsters. Greg and I scrambled back toward the CO station at the block entrance, a small, reinforced cage with controls. For the inner gates, two other officers, Ramirez and Chen, were already there, weapons drawn. "What's the situation?" Ramirez yelled over the din. "Riots hit A and D block," Chen reported, eyes glued to a cracked monitor showing security feeds from other parts of the prison. "Main gates are compromised, and..." "Sir, you need to see this." He pointed to a feed from the mess hall. It was filled with them. Dozens of inmates, maybe kitchen staff too, moving with that jerky, unnatural gait, attacking anyone still moving normally. "Infected," I breathed, the word tasting like bile. "Miller bit Greg. How fast does it work?" Greg looked down at his bandaged arm, his face paling further. Before anyone could answer, the power died completely. Emergency lights flickered, then went out, plunging the entire block into near darkness, lit only by the faint moonlight filtering through the high, barred windows and the sporadic flashes of sparks from smashed control panels. The roar of the riot intensified, punctuated now by those chilling, guttural snarls. We were blind, trapped, and vastly outnumbered by both the living and the dead. The darkness was a different kind of prison. Every sound amplified. The scrape, metal on concrete, the rhythmic banging from deeper in the block, the wet, tearing noises that followed sudden screams. Our flashlights cut weak cones through the gloom, revealing glimpses of horror. Figures huddled in cells, inmates fighting each other with shanks, and the jerky, shambling forms of the infected moving through the chaos, drawn to sound and movement. "We need to get out of C-Block," Eva's voice crackled, breaking the tense silence in our CO station. "Armory's our best bet. Regroup, rearm, try to retake control." "Armory's on the other side of A block, Captain," Ramirez reminded her. "That's ground zero for the riot and where Chen saw the mess hall outbreak spilling from. We move quiet. Stick to the service tunnels," Eva decided. "Less chance of running into Rhodes's crew or the others." The service tunnel access was near the showers, a dark, narrow passage usually kept locked. Greg, despite the bite and his growing pallor, used a master key override sequence he remembered from maintenance training. The heavy metal door groaned, revealing a steep ladder descending into blackness. The air that wafted up smelled like mildew, decay, and something else. That coppery rot scent I'd smelled near Miller. "I'm not sure about this, Captain," Greg muttered, eyeing his bandaged arm nervously. Dr. Lena had cleaned it, disinfected, but we all knew what a bite could mean now. "We stick together," Eva said firmly, though her eyes betrayed her own fear. "Ramirez, Chen, you take point. Greg, stay with me. Mark, you cover our 6. We descended into the tunnels, the darkness absolute beyond our flashlight beams. The tunnels ran beneath the entire facility, connecting blocks, administrative buildings, the infirmary, the kitchen. They were cramped, dusty, and filled with echoing sounds that played tricks on the mind. Every drip of water sounded like footsteps, every gust of air like a whisper. We hadn't gone 50 yards when we heard it, scraping sounds coming from a junction ahead. We cut our lights, pressing ourselves against the cold, damp concrete wall. Shapes emerged from the intersecting tunnel, silhouetted against the faint light filtering from a maintenance grate above. Not infected, their movements were too deliberate. Rioters, 4 of them, armed with pipes and shanks, scavenging. "Heard there's meds in the infirmary tunnel," one whispered. "Rhodes wants 'em." "Screw Rhodes," another hissed. "We get the meds, we get out through the kitchen tunnel exit. Heard it leads outside the main wall." They moved past our position, oblivious. Ava waited until their footsteps faded before signaling us forward. "Infirmary's compromised," she whispered, "but the kitchen exit, if it's true, escape." The thought was tempting, intoxicating. Our duty was to restore order, protect the staff, contain the situation. But Oakhaven was falling apart. The sounds from above, distant gunfire, explosions, the constant roar of the riot mixed with the snarls of the infected, told us the situation was spiraling beyond control. Maybe escape was the mission now. We reached the junction leading toward the infirmary and the kitchen tunnels. Another sound stopped us. Not scraping this time, but that wet, gurgling snarl coming from the infirmary tunnel. "Dr. Lena," Greg breathed. She'd stayed behind, treating the wounded, trying to understand the infection. Eva was torn. Duty versus survival, rescue versus escape. Before she could decide, Greg lurched forward, clutching his head. "Getting dizzy, Captain," he gasped, sweat beading on his forehead. The bite wound on his arm looked inflamed, the skin around it darkening. "How long ago were you bitten?" Ava asked, her voice tight. Maybe 2 hours?" Greg stammered, his eyes losing focus. 2 hours. Miller had turned much faster. Maybe the quick cleaning had slowed it, or maybe it wasn't just bites. We didn't know enough. "Mark, Ramirez, check the infirmary tunnel," Eva ordered. "Quick recon only. Chen, stay with Greg and me. We secure this junction." Ramirez and I moved cautiously down the infirmary tunnel, weapons ready. The coppery smell was stronger here. We found the access door at the end slightly ajar. Pushing it open, we peered into the infirmary's supply room. Empty. But from the main treatment area beyond, we heard whimpering, muffled sobbing, and a low, steady growl. We exchanged a look. Someone was alive in there, trapped with at least one infected. Signaling Ramirez to cover, I eased through the supply room door into the main infirmary. It was chaos. Medical equipment overturned, beds askew, blood smeared on the walls and floor. In the far corner, huddled behind a barricade of gurneys and cabinets, was Dr. Lena. She held a scalpel, her eyes wide with terror. Standing between her and us, its back to us, was an infected figure in a CO uniform. Davies, the one Miller had attacked earlier. He was slowly, methodically trying to pull apart the barricade, growling low in his throat. "Lena," I whispered. She saw us, relief flooding her face, but she put a finger to her lips, pointing frantically toward another door, the one leading back to C Block's main corridor. It was shuddering, heavy impacts shaking the frame. More infected were trying to get in. This was bad. Trapped between the infected outside and the one inside, with Lena cornered, Ramirez signaled, 2 targets, coordinated takedown. I lined up my shot on Davies' head. Just as I was about to pull the trigger, a new sound came from the supply room behind us. Heavy footsteps, voices. Found it. Infirmary access. Rioters. Rhodes's crew. They'd found the tunnel entrance. We were caught in a deadly triangle. Ramirez didn't hesitate. He fired, dropping Davies instantly. The sound echoed like a cannon blast in the confined space. "Doctor," Lena scrambled out from behind the barricade, rushing toward us just as 3 rioters burst in from the supply room, pipes and shanks raised. Simultaneously, the C-block corridor door exploded inward, and 3 more infected surged into the infirmary, drawn by the gunshot. Chaos erupted. Ramirez engaged the rioters while I turned to face the incoming infected. My first shot dropped. 1, but the other 2 kept coming. Lena screamed as a rioter lunged at her. I spun, firing my last shotgun shell point blank, spraying gore across the sterile room. Reloading frantically, I saw Ramirez go down, overwhelmed by the remaining 2. Then everything changed again. One of the rioters who downed Ramirez suddenly stiffened, coughed, and collapsed, convulsing violently. He'd been scratched, maybe bitten in the struggle. Within seconds, his eyes clouded over, and he lunged at his former companion. The remaining rioter screamed, backing away as his friend-turned-monster attacked him. The infected from the corridor were almost on me. I emptied my sidearm, dropping 1, wounding the other. Lena, surprisingly resourceful, jammed a metal IV pole into the wounded one's eye socket, making it recoil with a screech. Suddenly, Eva, Chen, and Greg burst in from the tunnel, drawn by the gunfire. Eva took charge instantly. Chen, secure. Lena, Greg, watch the tunnel. Mark with me. But Greg wasn't listening. He stood swaying, eyes glazed, the veins on his neck darkening. The fever had taken hold. "Greg!" Eva shouted, but he just growled, a low, guttural sound, and lunged toward Chen and Lena. Eva reacted instantly, firing her sidearm. The shot hit Greg in the shoulder, staggering him but not stopping him. He kept coming, teeth bared. Eva fired again and again. The third shot found his head. Greg collapsed, silent. The moment stretched, broken only by the sounds of the remaining rioter being torn apart by his newly turned companion and the groans of the wounded, infected Lena had stabbed. Tears streamed down Eva's face, but her hand holding the pistol was steady. "No time," she choked out. "We need to get to the kitchen tunnel. Now." The path to the kitchen tunnel access was deeper within the infirmary complex, through labs and storage areas we rarely used. The immediate fighting had subsided. The turned rioter was busy with his former friend. The wounded infected Lena had stabbed was twitching but not moving. But we knew more could be coming from C-block or the tunnels. Eva led the way, her grief momentarily suppressed by grim determination. Lena followed close behind, clutching a salvaged first aid kit. Chen covered our rear, his face pale but set. I brought up the very back, haunted by the image of Greg falling, the friend I couldn't save. We found the labs in disarray, hinting at the chaos that had consumed the medical staff. Microscopes lay smashed, samples spilled across counters, research notes scattered. Lena paused at one station, eyes scanning a printout. "My God," she whispered. They knew. They were studying the prion buildup even before the first reported cases. "Studying what?" Eva demanded. "It's not viral, not exactly," Lena explained quickly, stuffing the printout into her kit. "More like an aggressive prion disease, airborne. Or fluid contact triggers rapid replication in the brainstem. Rewrites basic functions. Aggression, hunger, loss of higher cognition." She looked at us, her eyes filled with a terrible understanding. "There's no cure for prion diseases. No vaccine. It just burns through." Airborne? The thought sent a fresh wave of terror through me. Were our masks enough? Was it already too late? Focus, Eva ordered, pushing us forward. Kitchen tunnel, now. We found the access point behind a row of laundry carts. Another heavy steel door, another ladder, leading down. As Chen started to descend, we heard heavy footsteps approaching rapidly from the direction we'd come. Not the shuffling gait of the infected, but the measured tread of multiple people running. They found us, Chen hissed from the ladder. Or Hodes. It had to be. He wouldn't give up on the infirmary meds or the potential escape route. Go, go! Eva shoved Lena toward the ladder. Mark, cover the door! I took position, aiming my pistol at the corridor entrance. Seconds later they appeared. Rhodes and at least 5 of his heavily armed crew, pipes, shanks, even a couple of riot batons probably looted from fallen guards. Well, well, Rhodes sneered, stopping just outside effective pistol range. Look what the rats dragged in. Playing hero, Eva. It's over, Rhodes, Eva shouted back, her own weapon trained on him. The prison's falling, maybe the whole world. This fighting is pointless. Pointless? Rhodes laughed, a harsh, grating sound. Sounds like opportunity to me. A new world. Needs new management. And we need those medical supplies your doctor friend is carrying. Plus, that tunnel exit sounds mighty appealing. You won't make it out, I yelled. The infected are everywhere. We'll take our chances, Rhodes replied, gesturing to his men. Take 'em, they charged. I opened fire, aiming for legs, anything to slow them down. Chen fired upward from the ladder's opening, providing covering fire. Eva engaged Rhodes directly. It was chaos. Shouts, gunfire, the clang of metal on metal, all echoing in the confined space. I dropped one rioter, wounded another, but they kept coming, fueled by desperation and Rhodes's command. Chen emptied his magazine and scrambled down the ladder. Lena was already at the bottom. Eva was holding her own against Rhodes, using her training to keep him at bay, but his men were flanking her. Mark, get down! Eva screamed, shoving me toward the ladder opening as 2 rioters lunged past her. I tumbled down the first few rungs, landing hard at the bottom beside Lena and Chen. Looking up, I saw Eva kick one rioter back, but the other got inside her guard, plunging a shank into her side. She cried out, staggering back. Rhodes seized the opening, slamming his pipe against her head. She went down. Captain, Chen screamed, starting back up the ladder. No! I pulled him back as Rhodes peered down the opening, his face split in a triumphant grin. Looks like there's a vacancy for management after all, he sneered. He kicked the heavy steel door shut above us. We heard the sickening thud of a makeshift bar sliding into place, locking us in. We were trapped in the tunnels again, Eva lost, Rhodes and his crew above us, and the groans of the infected echoing from deeper within the darkness. Plunged into darkness again, broken only by Chen's failing flashlight and my own backup beam. The weight of Eva's sacrifice pressed down on us. We'd lost our leader, our way back blocked by Rhodes, and the sounds of the infected seemed closer now, echoing from multiple directions in the oppressive tunnels. The kitchen exit, Lena whispered, her voice trembling but resolute. The rioters mentioned it. It's our only chance. Chen nodded grimly. It's supposed to connect to the old storm drain system, comes out near the river, beyond the outer perimeter. He consulted a faded map plastered to the tunnel wall, tracing a route with a grimy finger. It's a maze down here, but doable, if we avoid the main access points. We moved deeper into the labyrinthine tunnels, the air growing colder, damper. The sounds were terrifying. Distant scrabbling, dripping water that sounded like footsteps, and the ever-present low moans of the infected echoing from unseen passages. Several times we had to backtrack, finding tunnels collapsed or blocked by debris from the chaos above. Once we stumbled upon a horrifying scene. 2 COs dead for hours, partially consumed, surrounded by the twitching corpses of 3 infected they'd managed to take down before succumbing. The prion disease, as Lena called it, was relentless. We, navigated by Chen's fading flashlight and the occasional emergency bulb that still flickered overhead, casting long, dancing shadows. Lena proved invaluable, her medical knowledge allowing her to identify potential hazards, stagnant water pools that might carry contaminants, ventilation shafts that could carry airborne particles if the filters failed. After what felt like hours, we reached a wider section of the tunnel marked with faded stenciling. Kitchen access, storm drain interchange. Hope surged, but it was short-lived. The interchange was partially flooded with dark, foul-smelling water, debris choking the passages. Worse, fresh blood stained the walls, leading toward the storm drain tunnel. Someone came through here recently, I said, examining the drag marks. Rioters? Or... A low moan answered from the darkness of the storm drain tunnel. We froze, cutting our lights. A single figure shambled into view, silhouetted against the faint light filtering from a grate far down the passage. An inmate uniform, torn and bloody. Just one, Chen whispered, raising his pistol. Wait, Lena hissed, pointing. Another figure emerged, then another, a dozen at least, moving slowly through the flooded tunnel toward us, drawn perhaps by the echoes of our movement. They were trapped between us and whatever exit lay beyond. The other way, I decided, pointing toward the kitchen access tunnel. It might be blocked, but it's better than facing that horde. The kitchen access tunnel was clearer but ended, abruptly at a heavy locked steel door. Maintenance shaft, Chen identified it, leads up to the dry storage area behind the main kitchen. He tried the lock, then shook his head. No override panel here, we'd need a key or this, I said, hefting the crowbar I'd salvaged earlier. It took both Chen and me straining against the rusted metal, but the door eventually groaned, open. We scrambled up another ladder, emerging into a large, dark storage room filled with sacks of flour, rice, and canned goods. The air smelled faintly of yeast and disinfectant, a welcome change from the tunnels. We secured the access door behind us, barricading it with heavy sacks. From the main kitchen beyond the storage room door, we could hear sounds, clattering, metal shuffling, and those horrible wet snarls. The kitchen hadn't been spared. Okay, I said, taking a deep breath. The kitchen loading docks are our best bet for an outside exit. Lena, stay here, keep this door secure. Chen, with me. We clear a path. We moved into the main kitchen cautiously. It was a slaughterhouse. Bodies of kitchen staff and inmates lay sprawled across the stainless steel surfaces and tiled floor. At least 5 infected wandered aimlessly among the carnage, drawn to the lingering scent of blood. One, wearing a chef's hat askew on its lolling head, was methodically banging a ladle against a large soup kettle. We used stealth, taking them down one by one with silenced headshots from Chen's remaining rounds, and my crowbar for the closer ones. It was brutal, messy work, but necessary. We cleared the kitchen, the silence that followed almost as unnerving as the previous chaos. The loading dock doors were reinforced steel, controlled electronically. Chen found the panel, bypassing the lock with practiced skill. Power's still out up here, he muttered. Manual override only. Together, we cranked the heavy wheel mechanism, slowly raising one of the large bay doors just enough to squeeze under. Outside, the pre-dawn light was beginning to filter through the clouds. The air was cold, carrying the scent of smoke from fires still burning somewhere in the distance. Freedom seemed tantalizingly close. We signaled Lena, who emerged pale, but determined from the storage room. Ready? I asked. Before they could answer, a voice echoed from the darkness of the loading dock ramp. Leaving so soon? Without saying goodbye. Hode stepped out from behind a dumpster, flanked by 2 of his remaining crew. They looked as battered as we did, clothes torn, faces smeared with grime and blood, but their eyes burned with a cold, calculating light. Rhodes held a riot shotgun, likely looted from the armory or a fallen guard. Hand over the doctor and the medkit, CO, Rhodes demanded, leveling the shotgun, and maybe we'll let you walk away. Not happening, Rhodes, I said, positioning. myself between him and the others, my own pistol feeling woefully inadequate against his shotgun. Wrong answer. Rhodes grinned, racking a shell. Just as he raised the weapon, a blood-curdling scream erupted from the kitchen behind us. One of the infected we thought we'd cleared, the chef, had apparently only been stunned. It launched itself at Rhodes's nearest man, sinking its teeth into his neck. The second rioter turned to help his friend, momentarily distracted. It was the opening we needed. "Now!" I yelled. Chen shoved Lena toward the gap under the bay door while I opened fire on Rhodes. My shots went wide as he dove for cover behind the dumpster. The turned rioter dispatched his first victim and lunged at the second. Rhodes fired the shotgun, not at me, but at the infected chef, the blast tearing it apart but also hitting the second rioter in the process. Lena and Chen were almost out. I fired my last few rounds toward the dumpster, forcing Rhodes to keep his head down, then turned and scrambled under the rising bay door myself. We sprinted across the service yard toward the outer fence, the sounds of Rhodes cursing and the dying screams of his last man fading behind us. The outer perimeter fence was topped with razor wire, but a section near the service gate had been torn down, likely during the initial chaos or by an escaping vehicle. We slipped through the gap and found ourselves outside the walls of Oakhaven Penitentiary for the first time in what felt like an eternity. We didn't stop running. We put distance between ourselves and the prison, the sounds of the riot and the infected finally fading into a low, indistinct roar. We reached a wooded area overlooking the facility, just as the first rays of dawn broke through the clouds. Oakhaven looked like a scene from hell. Smoke plumed from several buildings, fires burned unchecked in the rec yards, and the distant, constant sound of alarms still wailed. We could see figures moving on the walls, both infected and, chillingly, inmates who appeared to be patrolling, Rhodes's crew solidifying their control. The prison hadn't just fallen, it had been conquered, transformed into a fortress of the damned. "What now?" Chen asked, his voice hollow. Lena was scanning the horizon, pointing toward the distant city skyline. "Look." Columns of smoke rose, from multiple locations across the city, mirroring the destruction at the prison. Distant sirens, gunfire, the thrum of helicopters. The chaos wasn't contained. It was everywhere. Escaping Oakhaven hadn't brought us to safety. It had just thrown us from the frying pan into the fire. We stood there for a long moment, the three of us. A rookie CO who'd lost his partner and captain, a traumatized officer who'd seen the system collapse, and a doctor who knew the horrifying truth about the plague consuming the world. We had survived the riot, survived the initial outbreak within the prison walls, but the world outside was just a larger, more dangerous prison. "We find survivors," I said finally, the words feeling heavy but necessary. "We find a safe place. We use what we know." I thought of Eva, of Greg, of the sacrifices made. We owed it to them to keep going. Lena nodded, checking her medkit. Chen checked his pistol down to his last few rounds. The sun climbed higher, illuminating a landscape irrevocably changed. The first day was over. The apocalypse had begun, and our fight for survival had just entered a new, terrifying chapter. We turned our backs on the burning prison and walked toward the uncertain dawn.